Hello, so I'm going to show you an activity from this book. The book is called Teaching Music Composition and the activity is called Musical Storytelling, also known as Sound Effects. And this is a really good activity for a whole class of children to get them thinking creatively about how they can use sound and music to tell a story. It's a really simple concept. It works particularly well with primary school age children, but can be applied to older children as well. And so long as you've got a class with lots of children with instruments or a small group with children with instruments, then this will work. So the way you start is you have a story. In this book there's a couple of example stories. There's one called Lift Off, you can see that, and there's one called Don't Go Into the Woods, which is about a child who goes into the woods. But you can link this to literacy or other topics in school that you're doing. I've done it with a Roald Dahl story, I've done it with an extract from that, I've done it with an extract from a poem that the children in Year 6 were learning about a river. And it's a really good cross-curricular link there, where they're really thinking about the describing words in the text and how you could say that with sound. So the first thing you do is you need a narrator, and the narrator starts to read the story. But there are some bits highlighted in bold. When you get to a bit in bold, you stop, and that's when the music starts. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to be using a couple of very basic instruments. I've got a little drum here, I've got my trusty recorder, I've got an egg shaker, and I've also, just for fun, got a duck whistle. So these are instruments that a lot of schools will have handy. Maybe not the duck whistle, but the egg shaker, the recorder, the drum, all those sorts of things work fine. If children have got their own instruments, maybe they play the saxophone or the cello, encourage them to bring them in and join in with those as well. So let me give you a little example. We shall do the first story in the book, which is called Blast Off. And so the narrator starts reading. It was morning, like any other morning. Carly was woken up by the sounds of the birds singing outside her window. At this point you stop, because that's the bit in bold, and you say to the children, you've got 30 seconds to create a sound that represents birds singing outside somebody's window. Now this is going to sound very chaotic. It will sound something like this. I'm sure it will sound really, really messy, but that's okay, because the children, they need time to experiment, to try things out. And in a whole class setting, you haven't got the luxury of sending them off individually necessarily into their own little space, so you just do it all at once. At which point though, you then say, right, stop, who's got a good idea? And you go round hearing children's ideas and seeing what that's. So someone might have done something like this. And you think, that sounds nice, that's quite bird-like. You might hear somebody else and they might go like this. And you go, okay. And you ask them to explain how that sounds like a bird, or maybe encourage them to, how could you make it sound more like a bird? And you get the children to feed back, and then you decide, you either orchestrate it yourself, or you might have some children who are making decisions for you, and you say, okay, I think for this bit, we'll go with the recorder bit. And maybe the duck whistle. And you might have them both, try them both at the same time. And you might say, well, maybe not the duck whistle. It doesn't quite portray the sort of the early morning feel. So you experiment. You try lots of different things with lots of different children. You then move on. Okay, you say, right, we'll park that and we'll move on. And you read the next bit of the story. And as you go on in the story, lots of different things happen. So if you're picking your own story, make sure you pick one with lots of interesting parts in it. So the next bit in bold on here says, she jumped up and immediately hit her head on the shelf above her bed with a loud bang. And so then you stop again and you get them to experiment, and then you go around, and this time the person with the drum might have the right sound, and you explain that to them, and they start to see that different instruments have different roles. Different sounds mean different things. So whereas the recorder was really good for the bird songs, the drum is much better suited maybe for the loud bang of hitting your head. And it's really as simple as that. You would go through the story. Every time you have a bit which you've highlighted in bold, you create some sound as a group, you hear it individually, and then you orchestrate by picking individual or maybe a couple to play together. Once you've done all of that, you can write it up on the board as you go so you know who's doing what. You then go right back to the beginning and you read the whole story as a performance, and you get the children who've been chosen and the bits which you've decided to play different instruments on to play as you go through. That's the activity. There are ways to adapt it. Like I said, you could use different stories. You can also do it in small groups. Sometimes I do it as a follow-on to the lesson. I'll say the next week I'll give them all a copy of the story in small groups and see if they can come up with any more ideas or more refined ideas. Send them off into small groups. If you've got the luxury of a big space, a school hall, or maybe if it's sunny, I've taken them out on the school field and we've done it up there. As I said, it's in this book. If you want more details, there's a lesson plan and a step-by-step recipe, really, instructions as to how it works, along with all the other activities in here. It's available on Amazon, and if you just type this into Amazon, you should be able to find it okay. Thank you for watching.